Water conservation, you mentioned water conservation. We're already at a 20% reduction in water conservation. At the same time that we conserve water, there's more water available to the community, but there's also at the same time 20% cut on your water budget. Less revenues, I should say, that are coming in when you use 20% less. And that's a factor that fluctuates in how you operate your agency and what you have to balance out throughout the year or several years and make those adjustments to live on 20% less. So what it causes you to do is to go out and find ways to prevent other increases in cost, or find whatever cost-saving measures you can to save money to make up for it. The other thing is, as an agency, and looking at, and you may have mentioned that AVAC is looking to the future, it's real difficult when you're given the responsibility for the public safety, health and safety, and you have to make these determinations for future, because we don't have the luxury of waiting to the last minute and trying to react, because we can't react fast enough to provide water for people at the last minute. Now, in an emergency, we could probably do that for a short term, but for a long term in supplying an entire community, we have to plan for the future. So we use various different indices to make those determinations, and hopefully they come out based on those that provide the projections. The other thing is, in our community, one of the impacts that I can bring forward to the board that we're working on currently, we just were noticed that chromium-6 is going to be a new standard, or have a new standard. And although it has not been implemented yet, it is anticipated after the first of the year that there will be a new standard for chromium-6 in the water. Having said that, we will be having to look for sources of water that don't have chromium in it at a level that's in exceedance, because we need to prepare for the future, and we need to prepare a good water supply. So we'll be out testing some ag wells for the type and quality of water that's found in those areas, to give us some indication on where to drill test wells to see if we can find additional well sites. Hopefully the Department of Public Health is going to be helping us with that, and mitigate some of our costs, but track record isn't real good. So we're just hopeful that we can get some assistance, because just in the test wells and the exploration is probably going to be about $250,000. And that's before we ever drill a well, if we find a well site. And if we find a well site, we're looking at probably about $1 million for a well. Hopefully we could get it cheaper than that. John thinks we can, and if he thinks we can, I'm sure with his experience in drilling wells, we can. We will not build a Taj Mahal around our well. We'll build one that's functional and to save cost. But these are things that came upon us all of a sudden. We get a letter, we have to react. We've reacted real quick to meeting with the state, and hopefully we can find some state monies to assist us in doing this. But what it is going to do, it's going to cost the district in producing a new well, and the infrastructure that goes along with it. So those are things that we have to have reserve revenues for, and why we have a reserve, because if it does cost us $1 million for a well, it's going to probably be another $1 million for infrastructure to tie it into the system. We're going to be exploring several different ways of addressing a chromium issue blending water, developing a blending point with AVAC, and possibly drilling another well in one of the areas of the consolidation that doesn't have a chromium issue. It's naturally found, but now that scientists can find it and quantify it, they're going to regulate it. So it's anticipated from CDPH that it will save one life in a million by doing this. So that's some of the things that we have to look at, and that's one of a lot of others that we're dealing with on a daily basis. For the board's information, because of the issue of water rates always coming up and people alleging that our water rates are way too high, one of the things that I think that a person would look at, hopefully, is looking at everybody else's water rates. Are they so far out of line they won't match each other community, because there are other reasons why the differences exist. Some agencies are able to spread cost over larger payer groups, and which lowers the cost to the ratepayers. Sometimes it's political expediency, where a board doesn't want to raise the rates, even though they know they should, but it's going to impact the community, but it's their responsibility to do the right thing, rather than wait till it becomes a big increase. Or some of the areas may not have increased their rates as of yet, but may be anticipating to do so in the near future. But if you look at the two different handouts, one covers the 5/8 inch service, which most of our residential is 5/8. And if we look at this, for 15 units of water across the board, from LA, Waterworks 40, in Lake Los Angeles, Ana Verde, Palmdale, Little Rock, Quartz Hill, Rosamond, Lancaster, Palmdale, Lancaster, Waterworks, their area, Palmdale in their water district. Rosamond sits right smack dab in the middle, and almost exactly in the middle, and the average being a couple dollars higher than Rosamond right now. Now those are all areas in the Antelope Valley, and the reason for that comparison is because we're in the same basin. We're drawing out of the same basin, and we're going to be impacted by a lot of the regulatory impacts from the same basin. Mm-hmm. So how the impacts impact, say, a city versus a district with 5,000 ratepayers versus 100,000 ratepayers, the cost that we have to spread across 5,000 may increase a lot higher than what it would be if we spread that cost over 100,000.
I think it should be pointed out, Steve, is that the water itself costs the same regardless of where you get it. Where the expense is the delivery, the energy cost, the cost of running the pumps and everything else. So we pay the same electrical rate as Lancaster, but we have to spread our electrical bills over 5,000 dwellings, versus they can spread their electrical bills over 150,000 dwellings, right, or 100,000 dwellings. So it makes it, that's how they can keep their, like in this thing here where Lancaster Waterworks 40 has a rate of $30.89, where ours is $36.20. And that's the reason they can do that, is because they can take the chemical costs, the delivery, the transmission costs, and everything else is spread out over a much larger base of people.
Right.
And that's...
The other example that I put together was on a 3/4 inch service, minus the tacked on costs. And as you see, again, Rosamond is actually in the lower of the comparison communities. In this case, I utilized Mojave as one of the comparisons. Cal Water in the Antelope Valley, Indian Wells Valley Water District, AVAC, Bakersfield, the RCSD Bakersfield, I'm not sure where that's at, Cal Water in Bakersfield, Golden Hills in Tehachapi, and an average. And we're at 1968 in our base for the 3/4, and added on the top of the graph is per 1,000 gallons of water used. Each one of these entities will charge you additional for that. For each unit above, or for each unit, Golden Hills, for example, on the top, it's the last one on there. For the first 5 units, they charge $1.32, and each unit is 748 gallons. For above 5, everything above 5, they charge an additional $2.63. And for every unit that is consumed, they charge 53 cents for a water banking fee. That allows them to bank water like we're doing right now, but they're charging the residents to do that as they go, because they're producing that water for them and banking it, so they're ensuring that it's there. But as you can see, the comments that are made that Rosamond's water is too high, in fact, we're either average or below. And although it might be we're below a little bit, but we're not out of line with costs throughout the Antelope Valley or north of us or to the west. So we're actually in pretty good standing where the water rates are, and I think that this information needs to be given to the people, and so they have an understanding of where we're going. And some of the information that's being tossed about is non-factual information. And one of the sad things is the information being passed out. They're not even calling. They haven't made a request for information or any explanation request to get information so they can pass out to the public. It would do all of us a service if they were to ask a question, or if they were to ask, well, where does Rosamond fit in the whole scheme of things? And what I intend on doing is, with these 2 charts, they're going to go in our billing, so everybody in the community will know how RCSD stands in the water rate issue throughout the Antelope Valley. One more comment. I think the disconnect comes from people talking back and forth. They got friends in Lancaster, Palmdale, Quartzville, Mojave, or Tehachapi. One of the things that in the comparison that we hear most often is Lancaster and Quartzville are cheaper than Rosamond. Well, in fact, they're not. What they see is the total bill. Rosamond's total bill includes water, sewer, lighting, and Quartz Hill's water bill includes water. Their sewer is collected on their property tax bill. That's the difference that I think a lot of people are seeing and making their comparison on, and it's a mistake, and hopefully we can clear it up by sending this information.
Steve, I wanted to go back to a couple of things on the water rates. When the water rate study was done in 2009, did Glenn Ryder take into consideration the 2020 mandate that we had to have a 20% reduction by the year 2020?
Yes, you
Kathy
did.
shaking her head, yes, so that's good, so. And so basically, you know, our water rates were built to anticipate that drop in revenue to conservation, correct? Okay. Now, getting to the chromium 6, you know, because this is a state mandate, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Several years ago, there was a Senate bill, and it was 132B, or it's 32B or 36B or something like that. Basically, what that was is that all special districts were asked by the state of California for, I believe it was a 3-year period. Help me remember that, Kathy and Byron. I think it was for a 3-year period that we were to give up our property tax revenue.
Yeah.
And I think it was 3 years that we didn't receive our property tax revenue to help the state because they were having budget problems. And the Senate bill basically said, we're not going to give you your property tax revenue for 3 years, which amounted to over $500,000 for this agency. But in return for that, that Senate bill stated that they would not bring any unfunded mandates to the special districts.
Prop 13, and it was from 95, 96, and last in 97, and it was to be paid back in total.
No, it wasn't in the 90s, it wasn't 13.
I mean, 2000.
Yeah, this was something special, but I would like to look into that because if they're going to mandate that we, for chromium 6 and, you know, put in special equipment and everything, then I would think that, I would like to find somewhere to where, okay, state of California, you cannot put unfunded mandate on us any longer. If you're going to mandate that we do this, then we want you to pay the bill.
I agree with you, but the health and safety is what they'll claim. And with health and safety, that's one thing that you can't use the unfunded mandate when it comes to the chromium, where they say that people's health and safety are impacted, you have to do this.
Hey, John.
Just to clarify, it's the Environmental Protection Agency that's trying to govern this, not the CDPH.
So the feds are trying to do this.
Yes.
We don't.
Feds are pushing it down, coming through the state.
Okay, so if the feds are doing it, there's really, our hands are tied.
But as an unfunded mandate, I don't believe you can claim that when health and safety. What they'll claim is they put together low interest loans and Prop 84 type revenues to handle some of these things. We're talking about that currently. That was part of our discussion to see if there would be something available for us. They were hopeful that it would.
What is our current level of Chrome 6 now?
I think we have 2 that's 12 and 1 is 15.
Yeah, I was going to say it ranges from 10 to 15.
Parts per billion?
Yes.
The MCL is 10. Just like
What's the number they want?
Well, the total chromium is 50 right now. They want to take chromium 6 to 10. There is no regulation as of right this minute. They want to take it to 10.
proposed is 10.
What's the average right now?
Just for Rosamond, the highest we've seen is 15. Lowest around 9 or 10. I've looked at some other, when I say Rosamond, I mean this district itself, but I've seen some other wells on the outskirts of town that run at 27, 28.
You know, it also should be noted, you know, for public consumption, that in prior to the year 2000, chromium 6, as Steve pointed out, occurs naturally in the water, along with arsenic. That occurs naturally in the water, and arsenic is more prevalent in desert, mountainous type of communities where the water tables can be a little shallow sometimes, and things like so. It'll occur more prevalent there, where you go down to the other side, down into Long Beach and Bellflower, and their arsenic is down around, 1 part per billion. It's almost non-existent. But in the year 2000, the regulation prior to that was 50 parts per billion, and it had been that amount forever, ever since I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the 40s. And at the time it was passed, it was that half the scientists were split 50-50. Half the scientists says that it was fine at 50 parts per billion. Everything was good. And the other half says, no, we need to get it down to 10. In fact, there was such a controversy that when it was implemented, President Clinton's last act before he left office, signed it into law, and President Bush rescinded that when he took office in his first term. But because of the political nature, it was unprecedented. The U.S. Senate got together and voted, I think it was 98-0, to uphold the 10 parts per billion. And so therefore, that's what started that. And at the time, Rosamond's water was, our wells were 8 parts, 10 parts, 11 parts, 12 parts, stuff like this. So it was always on the low end of the scale, like with most agencies. And so now, chromium-6, of course, people think of Hinckley, and that big story there with Aaron Brockovich and everything else, but their chromium-6 numbers were off the charts because it was being introduced artificially by the cooling towers and everything from PG&E. So leaching into the water supply. But to having a natural occurring, 12 parts per billion, 8 parts per billion, we need to emphasize to the public that our water is not unsafe, but because of regulations, this is kind of similar to what happened with arsenic, that we're going to have to step up to the plate, and we're going to have to implement extensive cleaning measures to comply with the new, looks like, as John put it, federal regulations.
And I already checked with the granulated activated carbon expert, and he said, no, it won't take out Chrome 6. You have to do something entirely different. So it's costly to try to remove Chrome 6.
I got one other question, Steve. On this chromium-6, is it sounding like the state is going to give us the same kind of deal that the federal government did with the arsenic? In other words, they're going to give us like a 6 or 7 year window to kind of implement this, to where they're not just going to drop the hammer and say, you got to have this done in, in the next 12 or 24 months.
I don't believe that they're going to be any different than the arsenic, although it has been discussed. The standard hasn't even been officially adopted as of yet, and they anticipate early next year or sometime next year for it to happen. But I can't see how the state can require every water district to drop everything, spend millions of dollars to get up to speed, and not give them some help. As long as you're working towards correcting a problem, I think they'll work with you to get that done. They understand that moving that quickly is sometimes in some districts is almost impossible. Others, they can do it. They can.
So in other words, what they're going to be looking for is, do we have a plan? Mm-hmm. And that's something we'll have to work on.
Right. And I got to tell you that we're discussing developing that plan currently in our current engineering of the consolidation.